Okay, we're back on, and we were talking about the consequences of that
Well,
piece.
it's a good example, the lawnmower one, because it was so hard to do, and the story was so gigantic, and there were so many scenes, and it just kept getting whittled and whittled down, whittled down, whittled down. And there's a story in there about it being Joan's last day. Her going away party is hijacked. There's this thing about the 4th of July, that they've chosen this day to humiliate them, that Roger's not on the chart, that they're going to lose control of their business. And my wife actually gave me this amazing line, which really was the subject of this show, because I thought I knew what it was about, but she really just like nailed it. She's like, you need to see that Don is excited about the possibility, and that this is about expectation, because Sally, Grandpa Gina's just died, and she's afraid that his ghost is in that baby. And she says, he says, what are you afraid of? In the opening thing, she says, I'm afraid of what'll happen when I turn out the light. And that just became this thing that went off in my head of like, Joan says it, one morning you're on top of the world, the next thing some secretary's running over your foot with a lawnmower. The idea that, and I said it to the writers too, we had a lot of arguments about these things. Sometimes I'm fighting for my own stuff, because I care what they think. I really do. That's what's saying. I'm so strident about my opinions, but I really am very insecure. It's fluid. It's changing constantly. Some of the best stuff in the show is stuff that has come out of me sometimes, and I will get rid of it, and they will fight for me to put it back in, or stuff that they say like, why aren't you doing this? Betty Draper must sleep with someone at the end during Meditations in Emergency. That's what she must do. You don't want to hear it, but she must. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking of all the years I've spent in television and knowing that the main character, the man can do whatever he wants, but the main character woman, when she sleeps with someone else, it's over. Because it's one of the cardinal sins in television is having a married woman have an affair. It's death. The audience turns on her. They don't care about the guy. So that was in my head, and also I was like, would Betty really do that? And then I thought, well, it's the end of the world. All bets are off. Cuban Missile Crisis, she's pregnant with her husband who cheated on her. Her father died. No, her father hadn't died yet, actually, but no, her father had this stroke. She's drunk. She's alone in the city without her kids. She should do it. And it will actually allow her to take her husband back. So they fought for that. They really did. I came into the room and they said, we know what it has to be, and you're not going to want to hear it. And I was like, I do want to hear it, and we're going to do it. And it was the same thing with the lawnmower. I was like, I have this idea. We're gonna do it. They're gonna get drunk, and they're gonna run over somebody's foot. They're gonna injure them. Because my grandfather actually had his his shoe eaten up by a lawn. I mean, I knew it was possible. But that became this amazing story for me, structure, for Don to be laying there in bed with anticipation. I kept saying to them while we were having the arguments, I was like, I come and tell you tomorrow. I can't remember who was the largest. I have a very good memory, actually, for these things, for, keep score and so forth. But it might have been, I can't remember who it was, but I said to them, I come in tomorrow and I say, Vanity Fair wants to do a profile on you. They're going to be here on Friday. And they want to talk to a writer on the show, and they love your work. And I told them it was great, and I'm on board of it, and it's going to happen. And then Friday morning comes, and I say, you know what? They didn't have space for it. They had to cancel it. What happened? Nothing. The day before, you didn't know Vanity Fair was interested in you, and now you don't. And nothing happened. What is it? What's the big deal? I'll tell you what the big deal is. You have worked this thing out in your head. It's important to you. It's an opportunity. Even though it wasn't real, it's an opportunity. Even though it wasn't even supposed to happen. It came out of nowhere. I just found out you might have $1 million coming to you because your last name ends with an X. Oh, you know what? It turns out it's for people with Y. You still have nothing. That's a good story. And we tried to do it with all of them. Greg doesn't make it as a doctor. It's one of my favorite scenes in the show. And he's very good in it, and she's amazing in it. When he gets that letter that says, that they didn't want me to do it. Doctors don't write bad things about each other. the emotion starts to come out, and the writer's room is filled with that. And then the process of me actually writing those scripts, people don't reveal this ever. Maybe other writers don't feel it. I know David did. When you're writing emotional shit, it's physically taxing. And the end of the season comes, and I've had to think about a lot of things I don't want to think about. It's why I'll never have a child die on the show. I refuse to use that as the way it is frequently used. And I'm not saying it's not part of human experience, but I don't think it belongs in entertainment. I don't think it has stakes. I don't think it's appropriate. I think it should be the subject of something if it's going to be something. Because I grew up watching network TV I watched network TV and it sweeps. They bring out these episodes where the parents die in front of the kid. It's real stakes or the kid dies. I don't want to go through writing that. I don't want to live through it. So, but the writer's room, people give their ideas at the beginning of the year. We didn't do that on Sopranos. They tell 10 ideas each, and to the new people, it's really hard. It's a terrifying thing. I write everything down. I'm not interested in 90% of it. I talk through what I think the season's going to be about and what's important to me. And I give them usually the last image in the show for the season. I've done it over and over and over again. Don and Betty. Don sitting on the steps I didn't know about because that was supposed to end differently because I didn't know if the show was going to go on. Don and Betty, holding hands at the table after she says I'm pregnant. I mean, I'm always trying to challenge myself structurally. I don't want to be bored. So I do things that are kind of very high risk because I have to see if I can pull them off. And then I get all frustrated that I didn't pull them off. And then I really try and do it. And I never know if it's good or bad. But taking a story like that final episode of second season, Meditations in Emergency, and starting it with Betty being pregnant is just pretty unusual. That's the ending. I just found out I'm pregnant. But let's let her, like Mrs. Dalloway or something, wander around this day and completely disintegrate with this horrible news in her head. And that it's horrible. That it's a horrible news. What a tremendous irony to begin with, that she goes into the doctor and she asks for an abortion and he says, you're married. And only she knows that her marriage isn't, she hasn't shared it with anyone. That's not an option for you. That's for young girls, he says, who don't have another choice. He's not saying abortion's impossible. He's just saying, that's not an option for you. That's a drastic decision. And I loved her having to live with that. Loved her going to the beauty parlor and trying to tell Francine something that's going on, telling her she's pregnant, but not telling her that her marriage is falling apart. So I have those last images, and then we work our way through. I have the same thing with season 3. I was like, I want to see this intercutting of Dawn, of Betty being on the airplane on her way with her new husband on her way to Reno, and the baby, and the kids alone in the house with Carla, watching TV, with the chocolate milk. All that stuff is stuff that's on my mind. And Don getting out of a taxi and going into the Greenwich Village at Christmas and just walking into his new apartment. I knew that. And the same thing with this season. Don laying in bed with Megan there and just looking out the window like he did in the pilot. And knowing that, I feel like knowing that he had, I don't want him to be regretful about proposing to her, but knowing that he had not really made it, that he had sort of not embraced his independence, that he wasn't strong enough to be on his own.
So you had that from the beginning of the season?
The first day when I go in there with the writers, I have it. It's helpful. And then I often freak out and try and abandon it during the season. They keep saying to me, no, that's right, stay with it. Remember at the beginning of the season, you're doing exactly what you said. And there's a structure for me, that I know this kind of structure where there's a climax. And I never know if it's going to be episode 9 or episode 12 or episode 13 that's going to be the climax. But I do, in the third season when Betty confronted him, the gypsy and the hobo, I literally looked at that episode and I thought, some of it was an execution issue. The director has pacing issues, and really it's hard to control John and January in those situations, emotional stuff, but you have to be there. You have to put up with them fighting with you sometimes. They'll be grateful. They want to give you what you want. They do know you're seeing something they're not seeing. But we had to lose a lot out of that script. But I also felt like when I finished writing it, for sure, and I did love the episode too, it makes me cry. It makes me cry. Don coming clean and realizing like that he should have never lied, that it wasn't, that how small it seems once you tell the truth, and him having his pictures and going to hide them again and realizing he doesn't have to, and coming down, and Betty softening at the last minute, and that moment at the end, you know, who are you supposed to be with the costume, you know, and with the kids at Halloween, and I use the song from Oliver, Where's Love, you know, which is, makes you cry by itself. Just this idea, it's not an accident. Don is this orphan. And I do think, even though people can't put it into words, a lot of the show is about that. Women and men who identify with Don, not because he's cool and says fuck you to everybody and can solve every problem with his brain and women throw themselves at him, but because he is one person on the inside and another person on the outside. And that person on the inside, not so great, not so beloved by the people who should have loved him, missing something. I think everybody identifies with that on some level. No matter how loving your parents are, I think that's there. A little bit of like, I didn't get enough love. Maybe I did. Why do I need more love than I got then? You know, whatever it is.
Now going back to the structuring
Yeah.
of the series, you know, for the 13 episodes, how much do you know on that first day going in terms of?
I know a lot. I know a lot the first day. I've been talking about it before that to my wife and to my friends, and John Hamm and I have a traditional drunken lunch that we have in the same place every year where we talk about this guy and where he is in his life, and John has great instincts. And John says things to me like after season 1 with that, you know, he said the second season, he goes, so he's resolved to be faithful to his wife because Rachel Menken blew him off, and because he realizes that he values his life, and he's looked at these slides. You know what? He's gonna get bored. And like boredom itself, like so not part of my experience. We were not allowed to be bored. I had Betty say what my mother always says: go bang your head against the wall. Only boring people are bored. But I was like, he will get bored. And for all I know, I may be a person who gets bored. You know, I need stimulation. But the idea, I would have never gone there. Never, ever, ever. And John's also a big fan of What Makes Sammy Run, which I am also. And we just love that what is ambition about? And the second season to me became the story of Don. He's impotent in the first episode, literally, with his wife. And Mrs. Draper, and getting caught, and having his work exposing him. I knew he was going to get caught. I knew he was going to try and be good and have this relationship with Bobby Barrett. The audience was so upset about that. And I was like, you know what? He's not in love. She's not Rachel Menken. This is a weakness. This is a compulsion. They have a sick, sadomasochistic relationship that is about business. And it's going to be the undoing of him. Because I knew it was going to be bad for him, because Betty was going to find out through work. I knew this whole thing, that somehow his work would expose him. I didn't know that she was going to see the TV commercial at the end of that episode of Night to Remember, but I knew she was going to say, like, why did you embarrass me? Because the publicness, she knows he's a cheater. We know that. She's already confessed at the end of the first season to her shrink. She wants him to know that she knows he's a cheater. But the publicness of it, you know, was humiliating for her. And her saying, like, how could you not love me? Why don't you love me? And then kicking him out. And I wanted him to be on his own, be that separated guy in the hotel, and go out to California, because I had this from the first season. I knew he was going to go see the Mrs. Draper. I had a flashback, if you remember, selling cars in like episode 7. I think this is all second season. I knew I wanted to do this Jet Set episode. And I knew sort of where the climax was him. I had this tarot reading that I had done in between seasons for myself. the conclusion of it, and it's generated by a computer. I don't even know if human beings even come near it. It's like it's for entertainment purposes only. But it said, the only thing that's keeping you from being happy is your desire, your belief that you are alone. It's keeping you from being happy because you insist on believing that you're alone. And I was like, oh my God. And I saw him there in the ocean being baptized. And I knew that there would be hillbilly music playing. I used this George Jones, biblical song, a real white gospel song. Have you drunk a cup with him, And then he would come back and say, I haven't been respectful, and Betty was already pregnant, and they would end up together, staying together for the baby, because people do that. I knew that, yeah. And sometimes, I don't know if I plan it right or anything like that, but it's what I want. Season 3, I wanted them to have so much expectation, not just with the lawnmower, but with that baby coming. They'd stayed together for that baby. And I knew that baby was gonna come and she was gonna name it after her dad, and it was gonna fuck things up for them, and that they would not be any closer, and that Don would move on. I knew that Betty would find out who he was, all of these things, they're there. Now, and I knew I wanted to do the assassination. I knew that would be somewhere around the climax of the episode, of the season. I had this great sort of instinct, I think. I'm proud of it now, although it was hard to get myself to do it because I was scared it would fail, because I didn't know if I wanted the show to be a cliche covering the Kennedy assassination for the 8 billionth time, and everybody was expecting it, so there was no surprise. But I was like, I'm gonna make this a surprise, because the episode's gonna be about something else, and then all of a sudden, it's gonna be in the background on the TV set, and people got the chills during that episode. It was fantastic for me, and it felt like you were experiencing it. And also that the upshot of it would be not that a nation lost its innocence, which is the cliche observation, not that it's not true, cliches are often true, but that Betty realized that she didn't love him, and she wasn't gonna put up with this anymore, because obviously there were no systems and there were no rules. The president had been murdered. The guy who supposedly shot him was shot in front of their faces. They would never know what it was. And why am I playing by these rules? There are no systems. She gets up and yells at the TV, what is going on? Right? And that was her thing. I don't love you anymore. I know who you are. I want this to work, but you kissed me at that wedding and I didn't feel anything. And I don't want to be in this thing anymore. And part of it being Henry offering her the lifeboat. So I knew that. Season 4, I knew exactly what it was. I tried to do this story about, I tried to look for a literary, I've used my sources up in a way. I'm moving through time. I've excavated my own life and John Cheever and the moods I wanted to create, the moods I wanted to introduce to the audience. Because now they act like, oh, it's typical Cheever and stuff like that. It's like Cheever was out of print when the show started, all right? It's not that he wasn't a Pulitzer Prize winning author and he had been on the cover of Time magazine in 1963 or 4. He was a pop icon, but he had disappeared. They started making Revolutionary Road the same time we made the pilot. They were related to each other. We got on the air, we got 2 seasons of the show on the air before the movie came out because it was so plagued with problems. But I couldn't get a gray flannel suit in New York. They were shooting, and I was jealous. They were shooting in Grand Central, and I was shooting in a fake elevator because I couldn't afford it. But I knew that there was no model for a divorced man. There still isn't. There's like The Odd Couple. Richard Ford's the sports writer. I started asking every writer that I knew, what can you give me? What is the story that's like this, Kramer versus Kramer? It's not of interest to us. And I started being scared, like, maybe this is a story not worth telling. Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it can't be told. Maybe it's not interesting, because the women's version of it, there's hundreds of thousands of stories about a woman whose husband is recently divorced and trying to get back on her feet. It's actually one of the big creation myths of our era. But the men, it doesn't exist. And I looked at it and I said, I know why, because men get married right away. They get married right away. That's why they don't write about it, because it's not an issue. They are not good on their own. And I got a lot of stories about men who had just been divorced and how they were behaving. and they didn't live in ritzy apartments. They were not good to themselves. They didn't understand, especially if they're cheaters, which people admit to me, believe it or not. People tell me these stories. You know, everyone was like, oh, he's lost his mojo or something. I'm like, no, here's the deal. When you date Bethany Van Nuys, if you're 38 years old and you date a 25-year-old woman and you're married, you might be able to sleep with her. If you're single or divorced, you're going to have to put in some time. They're thinking long term. This is not Don's other world. He's not being rejected. She's saying to him, let's go on a few dates and maybe something will happen. Why wouldn't she? So that was like a reframing of things. And I wanted him to be stripped down. I wanted him to see that his drinking was out of control. I wanted him to have problems with his wife. I wanted their marriage to be, I wanted Faye, I knew right away that this Faye character was going to be really important to him. And I wanted him to marry a secretary, because that's what they did. And I feathered her into the show. She was supposed to be in the first shot of the new Office, but we didn't close the deal in time. And so there's a background person in there who's very beautiful, and it's fun and everything like that, but I would have loved for Jessica to have been sitting there, because that was my idea, is that she would just sort of filter into the audience's perception and filter into his perception. And she would have been there the whole time.
When she was cast, did she know what the story would be?
She knew it was a big deal. She knew that it was a good part, and that it would amount to something, because she agreed to do it for not that much. Let's put it this way. I know that we paid her well for her level of experience and so forth. We never pay anybody that well, but I knew we were giving her what we give people who have bigger parts, but she would have a couple lines here or there. She'd be a background person. You know, she was just standing there. Yes, Joan. Thank you, Joan. I got that, Joan. You know, that's who she was. And then Blankenship, they don't know. They don't know. She didn't know she was going to die. That was all planned, to get Megan into Don's life in the most natural way possible. Because Joan was not going to give Don Megan as a secretary after his, situation with Allison.
Now, how much do the actors know about what's going to happen to them? I mean, for instance, did Joan know did Christina Hendricks know when she was sitting in the bus going back from what was supposed to be the abortion? Did she know?
I told her. I didn't want to tell her, but it just became this sort of strange thing where I was like, what am I going to get if I don't tell her? I didn't tell the director right away, but then I eventually told the director, which was a mistake, because she did a lot of publicity after the show aired, and she basically told the audience, we don't know, which I didn't want. I wanted them to think Joan went through with it. You can't control everything. I try, but you can't. No, I want the audience to have this experience. I mean, I tell John a lot of things. I want to keep it to myself and have it revealed to them in the script, but sometimes I've gone to them outside the set and pitched them the whole scene, like the words in the scene, because I've just written it. Is sound okay?
Yeah, you know it.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, we're back.
I don't tell them because I think they don't want to know, and I don't want their performance influenced. And it's tough, too, when it's the last episode. Brian Batt, Salvatore. Sometimes, one of the writers said to me, Jonathan Igla, who's the writer assistant last season, who wrote the finale with me, he goes, the one thing that's great about it, when someone leaves the show, you always give them a going-away present. You always give them something big. I had it with Joel Murray. I said, I have a huge episode for you, but it is your last episode. It's a great story, and you don't want them playing the result, even in the episode. You don't want to see Salvatore you want to see him filled with anxiety. And sometimes you get this incredible synergy between the reality of the situation. I think that firing scene with Don is so meaningful because it was Brian's last scene on the show. For now, anyway. John, let's put it this way. If you ask any of them, I really want them to not tell them. I want it to come down to them. I want to keep it under wraps. I don't want it, People have been fired on the show from the writer's room for revealing things to the actors. I'll be honest with you about that. I don't want them to not have rapport with them, but the idea that the actor is going to have some influence in that room, or get to know things earlier, or that information that's mine is going to be given to them. Because you can't change your mind after that also. You're going to have this big scene where you do that, and then you cut it. And then you're dealing with a disappointed person also. I try, but what I was saying, what I was smiling about was, I always say I'm not going to tell them anything, but John Hamm is right. He's like, you're the worst. If I'm really excited about it, I will pull him aside and say, this is what's going to happen. And sometimes I will be waiting for a reaction like, oh my God. And they're processing it. I've been thinking about it for like 3 weeks. And they're like, and they don't react at all, and I get all worried, you know? Phil Abraham is the worst to tell things to. I'm thinking about it. I'm like, why did I tell you this? Why did I tell you this? You obviously don't like it. It's not that I don't like it, but me telling the story, verbally telling the story over and over again is how I get through things. I tell it to Scott. I tell it to my wife if she has time. A lot of times she just sees the script. Not just, but I mean, she sees it realized and weighs in on it, and it's a surprise. I tell Dan Bishop is a great person to listen, the first season especially, who's the production designer. I love to go in and tell him what I'm doing and see what's going on in his mind. And I love to tell David Carbonara, who's the composer, love to tell him what's going on. I just sort of, you know, my assistant, whatever else it is, anybody I can trust, I to try and do it over and over and over again to see if I can work it out. And then I become so overwhelmed in the middle of the season, I don't even know which script is which and which story is which story. But it does help to tell the story of the season.
Do you have to tell the network?
They want me to, and they want outlines, and they want input, and I have found that them having a foreknowledge of it is literally a recipe for disaster, because then they have all these expectations, and they're like, where was that? And they start using your own ideas against you, and they start asking what things are going to cost, and they start telling people what's going to happen. But Linda Shupak, who is the head of marketing there, and Theanu, who's the head of publicity, but Linda Shupak in particular, I tell the entire story of the season before I tell the writers. She's very smart. We have a great relationship since the pilot. She's very educated. She's very supportive of me creatively. She takes notes during these conversations. I will stand in the Beverly Hills Public Library in the parking lot drinking an iced coffee, and I will tell her everything that I think this season's going to be about. And the entire marketing plan is derived from that. The poster comes out of that. And at the end of the season, I always come to her and I was like, did I do what I said I was going to do? She's, you know, and she is a great partner to me just creatively, even if it didn't help her job at all. I am articulate with her about my ideas. And we've had this appointment. And it's always about a month before I open the writer's room or 2 weeks before I open the writer's room. And I postpone it sometimes because I'm not ready. And I talked to David Chase now. I didn't talk to him that much first or second season, but at a certain point, once he'd started watching the show, we went on 6 weeks after the Sopranos went off the air. David disappeared for a little bit. We talked about the finale and everything, and we saw each other at the Emmys and whatever, but we didn't really. We are friends now, which we weren't when we worked together when he was my boss. It's actually one of the great rewards of the whole situation and we're all looking for approval. It matters to me that he likes the show. It really does. But I said to him this season, I said, I want to do this thing I want Don to ask this question, who am I? What is the meaning of this? And then get to asking that question, and then the business falls apart, and just have him abandon it. Just have him get so close to breaking through, to being a better person, or a more realized person, or accepting who he is, and just abandon it. Just like sell out. How does an ad man sell out? That's what the episode was about. That's what the season was about. And people were really disappointed in him, which they're supposed to be. And I showed the reactions of all the women in the office, everybody in this world saying, what is wrong with him? It was great to me that at least the audience knew that I knew what it was. But I said to David, I go, is that interesting? And he goes, well, it's only the basis of Western thought. I was like, oh, okay. So it's a good theme. He goes, yeah, it's a good one. And then I was like, oh, why has no one told this story? Is it because it's bad? Is it because it's too hard? And he says, just do it. It's a good story, you know.
Have you heard from him since that last?
I don't know what he thought about the finale because he's making a movie right now. I did hear from him. I saw him, and I talked to Denise, who was actually, I talked to Denise to find out what she thinks, not what he thinks, because she's, very important to the show and to The Sopranos for sure. And I got to hear a lot of things I wanted to hear. You know what? Honestly, I have parents, but it's just there are people who become that in your life, and I never thought about being equals with David, even though whatever I'm a staff writer or whatever. But and I do the same thing, but I did think about like, God, I really want him. I'm not going to seek it out because it's a recipe for failure, and it must be very complicated for him to see me succeed. It's got to be complicated because we're all competitive people. But he championed this thing from the beginning, and I know he liked it. And when he finally watched it, I offered to send him the DVDs early, and he's like, you know what? We like watching it on TV. That's who we are. We like looking forward to it and watching it. And it's very satisfying to me. He actually had a contribution. I don't want to like take it out of that, but I do talk to him during the season now, especially when I'm really stuck, because there's really no one else who understands what this is like. You know what I mean? It's literally, I have this gray eminence. I have this person who literally knows what's going on,
You can't say what that was, what that...
No, you know what? I can say what it was, but it's one of those things that I always feel like it's unfair because I have a writing staff that's giving me thousands of these things. I talk about a line my wife gave me. My wife sees it, she has tremendous impact, and I value her opinion, but there are people who I'm paying, and they give me these things every day, and then she'll come and like help shift into focus, and she's smart, and she's not a writer. So I always feel bad, like, oh, David gave me this idea. It kind of diminishes the fact that I'm getting Mariana Andre, Aaron Levy, Davi Waller. These people are giving me 50 ideas a day, So that's why I don't mention it. It's like, oh, that's David's idea. Thank you. It's a great idea. I used it, but it diminishes the people who work there every day.
I do want to talk about a little bit about the business model, because you've integrated the product advertising into the show.
I would love to talk about that because there is very little of it, and it is an illusion that is propagated by the network to try and get more business. It never works out. We've had this Jack Daniels thing the first season, which was against my will, and I didn't know that I had the right to refuse. I didn't know that, and no one told me. I did it. I'm in business, whatever. Second season, I did this Heineken thing, which I thought was a great idea because Michelob wanted to do it, and then they bagged at the last minute, and I was furious, and I said, let's do Heineken. And then Heineken, what I think is the most elegant, Cadillac was never involved in the show. There's no other product. These are the only ones. You have this on record. And Cadillac would not let Betty Draper throw up in their car. Trust me. I didn't even ask for it. BMW supports the show. And I actually, as a capitulation, as a kindness to the network, took the word Cadillac a few times out of the show, just so it wasn't so painful for BMW because they support the show. I always felt I was entitled to do it. I tried to get Revlon to be a real client the first year, and that's why I created Belle Jolie, because they didn't want to do it. So I was basically saying, like, you know what, I'll do my own products. You won't know what's real and what isn't. I am true to the trademark, so I can use their real campaigns. I make fictitious people up who go to these companies, and it will have this texture of real life because some of it's real and some of it's not, and people don't know what's real and what's not. Utz, I picked Utz because I grew up in Baltimore, and they were my favorite potato chips. They never had anything to do with it. And I see it on the Wikipedia. You can't remove it. The network keeps saying that it's true. So the Heineken thing was a disaster because they, in the end, their legal department had not talked to their product placement department. And they tried to have us put disclaimers on all the episodes of the season because there was so much drinking in it, and kids drinking and people driving drunk drinking. And I said, I told you alcohol's not a good match for the show, but you wanted to do this. It's, to me, as good an integration as you can have. It was subtle. It was in the middle of the story. The product was there. You heard it a lot. It's my belief in how advertising should work. And I have rules. You're not allowed to tell anybody that you're in the show. And you're not allowed to advertise in the shows where you're mentioned. People break those rules, it's over. So the Heineken thing was a disaster. By the way, this money is all supposed to go to the show. Then they wanted to encourage me, and they told me some of it would go to me. I've never seen a dime. Hilton, they approached me, said, we'd like to be in the show. Tell me about Conrad Hilton. The guy who mentions to me gets fired. There's nothing. I'm off to the races on Hilton. There's no leverage. There's nothing. I'm putting him in the show. I said, I am doing basically an $8 million campaign for this man, but they're not involved, so I can say whatever I want because he's a public figure, and I'm going to use his real life, and I'm going to use what I can find out about him. And supposedly, from the people who knew him, we nailed him, and Chelsea Ross nailed him. And at the end of it, Hilton said, oh, yeah, well, you know, the economy's tough, but we'll give you some money. And they gave some money to the network to offset the price. The next year, this last season, I got in a relationship with Pons. These are the only people that have ever been in the show. There's one other thing that was in there. I agreed as a favor to put, who knows why they wanted it, to put the trailer for The Day the Earth Stood Still, to put that movie on because John Hamm was going to be in the movie, or Fox or something had the movie coming out and they wanted to show that, I don't know what they wanted. Who knows how it works. I've offered it to people. I wanted a single sponsor for the show. I didn't want any commercial interruptions. I have offered it to American Express, saying I will put it in his wallet. At the end of the show, it will say, American Express brings you Mad Men. It will have the purple card that says Donald F. Draper, member since 1959, which is the first year of the card, or 58. No interest. So it's not that I don't want to sell out, but it is exactly what you think. The Pons Unilever thing was a nightmare. A nightmare. They mentioned it constantly. They made these fake ads without my approval that I am disgusted by using my cast, not my cast, shooting in our building with our old costumes and having people imitate the writing of the show and putting them in the show so that people stop the TiVo because they think the show's back on. And the idea that people would think I was associated with that, and the network completely denied any knowledge of it. And I have to believe, actually, at this point, when people admit that kind of incompetence, I actually believe that they couldn't control it and they didn't know what was going to happen. It's way more embarrassing than being sinister and saying I lied to you, is to say like I didn't know. You know, I'm called the president of the network on the set of one of those commercials because it was in my building. And I said, you know, they're shooting a commercial down here, an imitation commercial of the show, and it was actually for Pond's Cold Cream. They were going to make one for Pond's too, which they really weren't allowed to do. And he said, that's impossible. I said, I am on the set. I have the breakdown. I have the call sheet. Talk to them. So I can say here and now, never again. There's not enough money. I agree to the Banana Republic thing. That's been like an amazing experience. We got all their windows. The first year they gave us nothing but the advertising. The second year I said, you're having us be exclusive in television. It's a merchandising opportunity for us. Exclusive in clothing. We cannot sell our clothing anywhere else. Janie can't have a brand, Mad Men can't have a brand because we're associated with Banana Republic. You wouldn't let us do it, so you're gonna have to pay for that. So they did give some money to the show, and they gave some money to me, and they gave some money to Janie. But most of it went to Lionsgate and to AMC. But John Hamm said it to me, he goes, we're entitled to do this. We have all these products in the show. The thing that's infuriating to me is people like Kellogg's going around bragging about how they're in the show, and I just want real products in there. You know, people like McCann Erickson cutting together a fake reel of the show, putting it out of context and putting it on their website. And I was like, you're in the ad business. You have to pay for that. Oh, it's just an homage. It's just for fun. We love being in the show. I was like, I will never let this go. I've never missed an opportunity to let people know how evil they are now. They're hypocrites. So people who are in the brand business stealing your brand. It's not like some college saying like, Don Draper went to our fake college. It's a college. An advertising agency, it's annoying. So my whole relationship with this thing, I'm not in advertising. I am a business person. But I was like, if it will help offset the price of the show, if I can get them off my back budget-wise, if I can have more money for the show. I have a very long history of turning down personal financial gain to make sure that the show was good, and you have to do that. I didn't let them do a package on the show, which would have given me commission-free paychecks, because I didn't want them pulling $35,000 an episode out of the show for nothing that I could use for music and actors and sets. So I got animated about it because there are lots of people claiming credit for it, and the network acts like there's 100 deals in place. They never close any of these deals. They never, ever close it. Pepsi has been in the show 100 times, and they always say, you know, you're going to use Pepsi, whatever. And I just started using Coke. Coke was not interested in paying for it. And I always say to them, like, you have so much leverage. Just tell them I'm going to use their competitor. It's going to be in the texture of the show. And so this is not ambiguous. I really said, like, I will take money to put products in the show because I have to use something. But it never works out. And just like the real advertising business, the clients are always the problem. They do not know. The agencies are a problem and the clients are a problem. There are people who've wanted to be in the show, but then AMC is so demanding on their expense. You know, you have to you have to spend a lot of money to get in the show. So they don't close a lot of these deals. But as far as I'm concerned, after the Ponds thing and after being lied to about it and seeing how little control there is, I'm not doing it anymore. I always said I don't want to pimp out the show. I don't want people to be watching it and get cynical about why things are there. And that's what's so annoying about them bragging about it, because literally I've named 4 things in 4 seasons, and there've probably been 100 products on the show. Janssen, London Fog, you know, whatever. Half of them are made up. No one's paid to be on the show.
Oh, who knew?
Yeah, I know. Isn't that shocking?
It really is.
And by the way, it's a piece of information that's impossible to correct. It's impossible to correct it. I wrote into the Wikipedia personally, I will admit to that, and said, I'm Matthew Weiner, this is the truth of the thing. And they said, well, we have 3 articles that say the opposite. I was like, okay. What can I do? What can I argue about? 3 unsubstantiated articles on blogs. You just can't fight it. It'll drive you insane.
There's also been some merchandising of the series, the Barbie dolls. And
Okay, here's another example, the Barbie dolls. That is a promotion. No one got paid for that. The actors didn't even get free Barbie dolls until I freaked out on them. Lionsgate said, we will give you this for free. We will give you the Mad Men brand for free if we can have a say in how the dolls look and if you will release them around the time the show comes out.
Was it?
They don't value it. They sold the T-shirt rights for pennies. They don't value the merchandising. So I have basically, I basically still have creative control and approval over all these things, but there's no financial participation for anyone.
What about the Roger Sterling book?
Now, that was my idea, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to do this? And we took, Marcy Patterson is associate producer of the show, oversaw all the quotes. And I said, I don't want to write the novel, and I don't want anyone else writing the novel. I would do a book of quotes. I would do one of those top 10 list kind of books, the thing that you put in your bathroom, the thing you buy your dad. And it will have all of Roger's stuff. And actually, Denise Chase, David's wife, bought me for a Christmas present a book about this big that was a Wit and Wisdom self-published book from 1965 by an ad man. Harvey Peiser is his name. And we just did that. Because actually I found other ones that were like his. That was the way they were done. And we just made Roger's book into one of those books. I had the idea that Roger was writing a book. We kept talking about that season after season, that Roger was writing a book with Ogilvy's book coming out, that Roger would write a book, and we kept thinking how funny it was. And then I thought of the title, Sterling's Gold, and we kept waiting to put it in the show, And we executed this season. I was like, how great would it be if you could have that book? And so we did the book. I got the design for the jacket and everything right there and then. And then we tried to sell the book afterwards, and it was a lark. It was a goof. Dinah Mo's book was more substantial. I let her do that. She was doing these drawings for free. I introduced her to the studio and the network. I think that I said you have to pay her, and I think they did pay her. She did Mad Men Yourself, which is probably going to win some award for one of the most successful promotions. to do with the show for sure. And I do a calendar with her every year. It's my gift to the cast and crew. She draws a calendar for us, and she wanted to do the book. And she's a witty person, and she's a weirdo, and I let her do it. I didn't have anything to do with it, but I did allow her to do it. All of this, the only reason the money gets mentioned is because I want people to understand, like, I don't want to pimp out the show. I would sell the show to sell the show, you know, to capitalize on it because it's going to be done. I know that there's money in T-shirts. I know that people want T-shirts. Some of it's my ego. I want people to be wearing Mad Men T-shirts. I always bought stuff like that from shows, but I don't participate in any of it. And deals have been made that are terrible. So we tried to take control of that at a certain point. And, you know, as you gain more success, you gain more control of it. But I just didn't want a lot of garbage out there. And so I have control over that. So things that you see that you don't like, they are from me. If you think the book is a sellout book and you feel ripped off about it, you can blame me for that.
Another really interesting thing about the series, and I think this might be the first time, it's so you're recording the history of the show with as you go, with the things that you're putting online about with the actors and yourself talking about the episodes.
It was a weird thing, yeah. They did a marketing thing. I told you, they are the ones who put my name on the poster. I didn't ask for that. We did a thing at the beginning called Inside Mad Men where they talked to me, and I was very frank about everything, and the audience loved it. They ran it on the channel, and it got very high ratings, and people loved the tone of it, and they loved my honesty, about creative honesty anyway. And they loved hearing the actors talk about a character. And so it just became a part of their marketing, their unique sort of, I mean, electronic press kits are not new, but they became their unique marketing. And so they used to be on the air. And the reason they're not on the air is not just because the advertising dollars are worth so much more, but because the website is a huge success. And this is unique content for the website. So on the one hand, I feel like eventually it's going to totally turn around and okay. Eventually, at some point, I feel like eventually I'm gonna get slapped in the face saying, like, why do you have to keep explaining what's going on with your show? On the other hand, I feel like the show speaks for itself, but if you want to know what was on my mind, people want more, and they want it to be deeper, and I can at least tell them what was on my mind. And so the DVD commentaries are detailed. We explain to people different jobs. It's not made by robots. I don't do it by myself. Everybody's expressing themselves on the show. And the thing that's been amazing about it is I think that even regular people in their lives understand that because the show is so peculiar, it is a beacon, and this is something I would have even put on my list, for creativity. It is so unusual and so peculiar and so out of the beaten path and so out of the business model. And we talk about where ideas come from, and the show is about that, that I think that it becomes this thing in people's mind that's very encouraging for them, to indulge the artistic side of themselves, to take risks, to, I hear it a lot. I mean, I would say that artists love the show, and wannabe artists love the show. And I'm sure a lot of people are going into advertising because they think it's artistic because of the show. I don't know that it is. But I know that I'm very proud of the fact that all that ancillary, I mean, I'm embarrassed by it on one hand, but it was a commercial decision. The DVD, not so, but the rest of it was a commercial decision. I didn't know that anyone would give a shit what I had to say about the show. David would never do this stuff. Never, ever, ever. He would say, in a very adult way, I said what I had to say, it's in the fucking show.
So you've become a public figure because of that. I mean, people, I'm sure you recognize. What's that done for you?
I like it. It has some negative aspects. I am getting 1/10 of 1% of what an actor would get, and it's still overwhelming for me. On the other hand, you know, I get a letter from the president saying he loved the show. You know, I hear people that I admire I get to meet, and hopefully, you know, I wanted fame. You know, won't lie about that, and that part of it's really nice. That part of it's really nice. But it's the way I could handle it, honestly. I've seen these people's lives change, and I'm very excited for them. And I've seen my life change, and you don't feel like yourself, and it is very complicated. But you know, again, the childhood brain, like saying like, God, would you like to be known for being a great writer? Yeah. And you know, the other thing is it's so temporary. But at the same time, there is a permanence to this part of the experience where you're like, you'll always be the guy who did that show. And, you know, I worry about how it influences my family and everything like that, but I have so many people in my life who are dedicated to keeping me in a realistic sense of myself. You know, I'm not a genuinely humble person because I've sought this out, but there is, I'm proud of my behavior so far. And then you also, the negative part of it out there is really about the internet, which is very damaging to artists. It really is. This sniper mentality of like, people can say whatever they want in an anonymity. It's fine, but it's overwhelmingly negative, and it's very painful, and it really, those become, you're oversensitive to begin with, and they become voices in your head. I've heard lots of people talk about it.
I was going to ask you about that in terms of, you know, I've seen a lot of lobbying for storylines, for...
Oh, I never
you know,
listen to that. Oh my God, it's like, the audience does not decide what happens on the show. I don't care what it is. I'm not saying fuck you to the audience, I'm just saying like, you don't know what you want. And also, the people who are vocal are not necessarily the audience. That's another thing. I say people think this about the episode, and someone will always say to me, who thinks that? The people who wrote on the internet, they're not the audience. And it's true, actually. I mean, I had this strange experience about the finale this year where the internet was overwhelmingly negative immediately. Then they took it back and said, oh my God, it's genius. The regular people who saw it were fighting about Don. Everybody loved the season who talks to me. You know, the minute you start analyzing something, you're critical of it. I can't take it. I can't take any criticism anyway, but I'm seeking it out. I mean, you know, it's a tough thing. It's a very, very tough thing. And you think about all the artists you admire and their relationship with their audience, and who knows, you know, how it works. They don't get to say what it is, and I don't want to be defending the show all the time. But the people who are writing on the internet are not necessarily the only people watching the show. In fact, they're a very, very small percentage of it. And they all kind of agree with each other. And the people who watch the show and experience it have a totally different understanding of it. They never ask me things like, why did Don do this? You know, they don't.
what do you think is the biggest misconception about you?
About me? That I mean, it's your worst fear, you know, that I'm like this. You know, every time I get an award, I always wonder, like, what act of accidental hubris is going to be thrown at me on this, you know? I am so grateful. And so I think the fact that I'm combative or something, some of these things that I've gotten a reputation for don't bother me. They're kind of like, I'm a mama lion, I'm protecting my cubs, you know what I mean? The people who work with me, we have a very good relationship. A public perception, and I may be imagining this, but that I'm egotistical, and that I'm full of myself, and that I tell everybody what to do, that irritates me, because it's not true. I mean, I wish I had the strength that people think I did, that I walk around like I'm God's gift, and and I'm some little bull in a china shop. I'm like a totally insecure, artistic person who, like I said, I have strong opinions about my work. I don't think everyone else in the world is an idiot. I write about it all the time. When I hear people say like that Don is behaving in this way, and I'm unaware, like I'm writing, I'm unaware that Don's being a bully, or Don's beating the shit out of his underlings. I'm writing the underlings also. Do you know what I mean? I've been the underlings. You're not supposed to like Don when he's doing that, or you're supposed to be confused about who's important. There's so much of me in that show. I'm just doing my thing, you know? I don't want to be patted on the back for that. I want people to watch the show and be blown away, and I want to know that the show won't disappear like the minute we're finished with it. Those are that's the part that's your ego. But you know, to have a TV show, you have to have a certain amount of a delusion. You have to have an ego to believe that you're the person who's going to get to do this, and you're the person who's worth listening to, and you're the person who can pull it off. But I am a collaborative person. It's our show. I make the decisions. I'm a dad to some of these people. I am a husband to some of these people. I am a boyfriend to some of them people. I'm a buddy to some of these people. It's just like anyone who has one of these jobs. And it's not like heavy as the head that wears the crown. I'm not like lonely and burdened by this thing. I am in an ensemble, and we are underdogs. We always will be underdogs. No one ever sees themselves differently. We were all adults when this happened to us. It makes a big difference. Even Lizzie and Vincent have been working since they were kids. They you know what I mean? So everybody appreciates it, and I constantly, the thing that I would like to be known for and quoted about in terms of my reaction to the experience of the show is what I say to the people in private, which is where I look at John Hammer once in a while and I just say, can you believe this happened? I said it 2 days ago. Can you believe this happened? I feel, I'm superstitious, so I'm gonna say, let's keep going, but some of it is just an amazing dream that I've not been able to absorb.
What do you think the future of the series is?
The future of the series, if they pick it up, I never know. 2 years, 6 years would be great. It's perfect amount. It'll be horrifying when it ends. But that's what I would like to do, and then move on.
Okay. Let's stop the tape.